Welcome to another episode of CrossTalk. My name is Kevin Tocci, and I will be your guest for the next 30 minutes. Now, as you have come to expect from this particular program, what we like to do is explore things that are going on in the two communities we serve in the Whitman and Hanson area. Also, discuss various topics, whether it's a local issue, maybe it's things coming up like an event, you never know. And it's that time of year where we talk politics, and that's where we're going to leave it. Is actually we have a gentleman who is here. His name is Chris Cataldo, and he is running for Congress. I want to say the 9th Massachusetts District.
That's right.
Chris, welcome to CrossTalk.
Kevin, thanks for having me on.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been working in consumer small business banking for the last 6.5 years. I've actually studied government at Suffolk University, and really been spending a lot of time working with the people of our community. At my desk every day in the bank, I'd sit with consumers, small business owners, help them overcome the challenges that we all face together as citizens. And I think right now in this critical time, that we're facing as a country, we need a leader and leaders in general that understand the reality of what's going on. And so, really pride myself on being an option on the ballot, third one down, November 8th, and, looking forward to having some record turnout. We know that there's going to be record money spent, and, we'll talk a little bit about that, in more detail and how it connects to the issues we face. But, we're really looking forward to that. I know that voter registration deadline is October 19th, and then I know in Massachusetts, October 24th, to the 4th of November. You can vote early in certain places. So, to all you viewers out there, we need more informed voters, and looking forward to winning your vote over. And, again, really appreciate you having me on, Kevin. Thank you.
What made you run for office? What made you run for Congress? Why this office?
Well, I'll tell you, there's so many things that happen throughout your life that put you in the situations that you're in. And everything happens for a reason. I'm a true believer of that. I had two unsuccessful, but I say successful runs for selectmen in Norwell, where I say successful because despite the lack of electoral victory, we started conversations about zoning laws in town to induce solar activity. We talked about sidewalks. We even talked about putting on the warrant, some of the balances of the unfunded pensions and municipal liabilities. And so what I'm saying here is that, we need more people involved. And, I think what really got me going here, there's so many different factors that really, connect my motivation to running. One of them definitely is that, as I worked at the bank, and I worked for Bank of America, one of the largest market share banks in the country and the world, and also Eastern Bank. And the interesting difference between the two is Eastern Bank is the largest mutually owned bank, so there are no shareholders. The bank owns itself. One of the only banks that didn't lose a penny during the recession. Which is really interesting. And so I got to see how things worked over there, and had that experience of working for Bank of America as well. I was actually in the financial district, believe it or not. My office was right across from Dewey Square. And I wasn't up in any Ivy Tower. I worked in retail consumer banking, which means that, I was the guy you saw at the desk, if you need anything at the bank, whether that's, you're a consumer coming in for anything that you might need, or whether you're a small business owner. But I saw a lot of interesting things happen, and, watching all of these people suffer and struggle, and myself too, again, grew up very fortunate to be born and raised in this district. This is one of the most beautiful places in the world. The 9th District of Massachusetts, Massachusetts in general. The South Shore, South Coast, Cape Cod, and Islands. Really, that's the equity that we all share together as a community, and that's why it's such an honor to be on the ballot and to give the people of the district an option that isn't bought and paid for, which is why I'm running. Through running at the municipal level, I really did get a front hand high five. I don't want to say a high five at all by any means, but the reason why I'm not affiliated with the party is because what I found firsthand is that the parties are more concerned with keeping their portfolios at certain levels. And portfolio isn't just money. This is relationships. This is accountability for different issues. And I think what we saw, at the beginning of this election cycle, we saw certain states out west, GOP states, where people went to vote in the primaries and they could only vote in the state, local, and county elections. The party had decided, that they were going to cast their votes towards another person, undermining the people firsthand. We saw on the Democratic side, we saw up in New Hampshire, overwhelmingly the state voted for Sanders, and yet the entire delegation for the party went to Clinton, and that was just a complete blatant disregard for what the people have in mind. And we're not just seeing it in the elections at the primary level, and that's why I'm unenrolled, by the way, because either party, I truly believe that I could win the primary, could have won the primary, but the risk of it being pulled and taken away from me because I'm not going to be the right corporate sponsor. That's the problem with politics right now, is that the money has completely tainted the integrity of it.
System is broken.
System
is broken.
Completely broken, Kevin.
Yeah, you know what? We keep putting duct tape and Band-Aids and whatever we can find to stop up the leaks for the time being until we figure out how to fix it.
Well, what I've found is, from going around this district, from getting on the ballot, from shaking hands, from going on the grocery store tour, as I call it, is that we've got the most talented folks, I think, in the country. And we're all so thirsty for the opportunity to be a part of the economy, to own a small business, to have a small business. We're all so thirsty to move on to different points in our lives. And, there's so many factors coming into play, whether it's the trade policies of this country, whether it's the fiscal policies. I mean, and honest to God, we've also got an epidemic when it comes to heroin and opioid use. Sure. And we're in a state where doctors can actually make money based on what they prescribe to patients. And you look at the heroin epidemic and you find that 80% of those on heroin actually started in one way or another with a prescription opioid that doctors made money on. And I'm not talking about a little money. I'm talking about over $100 million in Massachusetts, $170 million to be exact. And, we're looking at Massachusetts being the 5th most profitable state in doctor kickbacks. And, that's a problem, especially when you look at the fact that, if you take OxyContin, for instance, Purdue Pharma's, pain reliever that, by the way, was patented a certain way to make sure that it was going to possess market share.
Yeah.
These doctors, and that's why, when you look at the heroin opioid epidemic, nothing frustrates me more than when we try to blame the epidemic on marijuana.
Sure.
Which we're seeing happen, throughout the legislature. And, the real cause of this, so you look at OxyContin, you look at heroin under a microscope, you're going to find they're almost the same. And when you look at the clinical trials that, through the FDA that approved the drug, you find that a rescue drug was used in 50% of the people that were tested, which really nullifies the results. And it's $5 billion, Kevin, $5 billion on average to approve a drug in this country through the FDA, which is just a problem in itself. That fuels the need for the cost to be what it is. And this is a huge issue. Our senior citizens, they're seeing at least 58% of them are going to see a cost increase in respect to their premium, their health insurance. I mean, we're paying more and we're getting less. And we've had this country for over 240 years, and we've been able to deliver a quality of life, much greater for much less. And that's why, the theme of my campaign is that American quality of life in many ways, in my opinion, is under attack. And that's why we need political representation that isn't going to be bought and paid for by special interests, and that's why I'm here.
I would ask you this, I think the biggest, you talk about the government being broken, I think the federal government is a prime example. You look at what has taken place over the past couple of years where they can't get anything done. Nothing can be moved forward because there's so much partisan politics that is taking place that you can't get anything done. Nothing can be moved. We can't accomplish anything as a country. As somebody, if you are successful, what do you do differently if you are sent down to Congress as a representative on the first day? What do you do?
Well, I'll tell you what's going to be very different right off the bat, and it takes place immediately, is the campaign finance reports. I encourage you, Kevin, and all the viewers to go to the FEC and to look at my opponent, Bill Keating, Mark Allegrio. If you look at my report, you're going to see that Keating, the Democrats, got over $600,000 in the coffer. You're going to see that Allegrio's $300,000 more coming. And you're going to see that for under $5,000, we achieved ballot access in 46 towns and cities the largest district by geography in the Commonwealth. And we did this so that we could really prove that we can get more votes for the least amount of money spent. And that's where this begins. It begins with me saying, not just right now, I already have said it, but we'll say it again, that once elected to the United States Congress, I won't accept a penny more than the median income of this district, which is $69,000. Right now, the average, the incoming salary is $175,000. That's over 300% more than what the average American's making right now. No wonder Congress is so out of touch. Just one of many reasons why. Because in order to understand the partisan gridlock that we're faced with, you have to understand that Democrat, Republican, you're forced, and when I say forced, I mean forced, for your career's sake, forced, and we all know how that feels to be pressured, in respect to our careers. You're forced to be on the phone, dialing for dollars on average. Studies have been done to prove this. 6 to 8 hours a day. And I'm not talking 5 days a week, I'm talking 7. And the people that are being called, they're not people like you and I, Kevin, that have to work 40 hours a week and punch the time clock. These are folks that have special interests in respect to certain investments or certain movements of assets or certain things, of all sorts of devious natures. And so I guess, being elected to the Congress right off the bat, taking no more than a penny of the median income, proven that if I want to raise, every person in my district needs to have a raise first. And being able to reach across the aisle, being somebody that, because remember now, the only time...
Wait. People do that nowadays? They reach across the aisle? They actually...
And you know why you haven't seen that?
You have proof of this?
Well, here's the thing. The proof of it is the campaign finance reports, the fact that we've got more money than ever being spent, and take a look at what we've got for options on both sides. And, it's obvious that even though this money is at record levels, the investment return on it is at record lows. And what I'm trying to say here is that as an unenrolled candidate, I'm not going to have to swear my allegiance to caucus with the Republicans or the Democrats. I'm going to be able to show through real facts and numbers that we have the ability to prove, I think, not just to ourselves in the body of Congress, but to the people of the country, that we all have a lot more in common than different. And I know this not because I pay $10,000 a month or so to consultants to tell me what to do. I know this because I stood outside in these grocery store fronts and looked people in the eyes of our district. And, I know that what's happening with these two parties is that we're being divided against each other. And this partisan division is through different issues that are making it so that things aren't happening and that things are happening, and in a way that's not in the benefit of the people. In other words, we're being tricked to fight each other, and when we have a lot more in common than different. And in this critical time, we need to unite. I believe I can do that because I don't have the political ball and chain of the party affiliation, which, again, I think, you look at what happened with Brexit, you look at what happened with the GOP nomination, you look at what happened very recently with the FARC vote in Colombia. It's obvious to me these polls are not correct. And very, very similar to the polls not being correct, the parties aren't either. They're out of touch. And, I really encourage everyone to go to our website, CataldoForCongress.com, after you look at the FEC report, because you're going to see that every single piece of information you read is my actual belief, and it's not something that I'm being paid to believe. And
and it's not something that you got a campaign advisor who's spinning and putting up for you, right?
This is real content. And
Wait, people do that?
It's funny you say that again, because when you first said people reach out across the aisle, the reason why you don't see that is because the only time they put the phone down from dialing for dollars, and remember, by the way, we've got we've got more than $370 million that's been raised so far for U.S. seats right now. And again, we've achieved ballot access that typically costs about $1.6 million. We did it for under 5,000. So just to prove that what I'm saying is in fact the truth. And what I really intend to show here is that what you were saying that you never see the reach across the aisle. That's because the only time the phone comes down from dialing for dollars, and they do it in a private office across from the Capitol, it's when they're being forced to vote a certain way, party line. And that's not a liability that you as a voter have in casting a vote for me, third one down for Congress.
I have to ask you, you look at what's going to be at the top of the ticket, top of the ballot come November 8th. And for the first time that I can ever recall, whether I hear somebody who is a diehard Republican or somebody who is, they're as liberal can be, but yet they each look at who their nominees are, their party nominees are, and they're like, I'd rather have anybody but. And of course, we're talking about Donald Trump, we're talking about Hillary Clinton. Both of them have their issues, whether it's believability or just the other one doesn't know how to just shut their mouth. And some of the things that they keep saying over and over and over, you're like, oh my God, this person should have been eliminated when there were, 52 candidates that were up on stage and we were hearing them talk. They should have fallen by the wayside. But yet we have candidates that they are the nominees for their parties, and yet this is what America has to pick from. Do you feel this situation is something that could trend down ticket and help you as to anybody but the people who are in this part of this two-party system?
Absolutely. And I say that just simply by looking at the facts. You'll notice that there are more unenrolled independent candidates, more unenrolled independent people in Massachusetts than any other party. So technically, if everyone goes to the polls and votes unenrolled, I should absolutely win by an overwhelming majority. I mean, we've got 712,000 people in this district. We got a little over 500,000 that are registered voters. And, we're looking at a situation here where the polls are wrong. And we're looking at a situation where we think almost half of people that are Democrats or Republicans may be voting the other way. Never mind, the fact that we've got two other candidates on the ballot for president. Never mind that there's over 1,000 people running for president, believe it or not, in this country right now. What I think is going to happen here is that I think people are going to go to the polls and they're going to say to themselves what I say, which is that, Bill Keating, Mark Allegrio, good people, Democrat, Republican, the safe bet, but not now, not anymore. And I think the proof is all around us. I don't think we have to look far to see. I mean, we've got 22 veterans a day committing suicide. We've got a $21 trillion deficit, 9 or 10 trillion of which is just simply, being controlled by private entities and foreign companies. We need to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership, what I believe to be the last nail on the coffin in respect to the American economy. We need to realign our currency with the rest of the world. I mean, you look at the 148 nations that we do business with. First of all, look at the World Trade Organization, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. You see that the United States surrenders its preference when it comes to writing policy that's the most beneficial. Look at
NAFTA. I mean, I remember when they were talking, when in the 90s they were talking about how great NAFTA would be, and inside, even though I was young and inexperienced at the time, I said to myself, this can't be good if we're willing to, let down our guard when it comes to tariffs and monies that we can gain. This is only going to help and benefit those corporations that can move outside of our country, get cheap labor, and then be able to ship stuff back to the country. And you know what? They're making hand money over fist. And you know what ends up happening is the American public loses jobs, and we lose and we suffer basically.
Kevin, we've lost in the last decade 66,000 manufacturing plants and 5.7 million jobs as a direct result of NAFTA. Yeah. And these investor-state dispute tribunals override U.S. law. And we don't allow that to happen. As far as I'm concerned, sovereignty, is the most important thing. We saw with the Trans-Canadian company, TransCanada suing the United States in an investor-state dispute tribunal for $15 billion because our president exercised his veto in respect to the pipeline. It's just one example of the windfall that we potentially could have in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The fact that there's even talk of that being crammed through Congress, even a lame duck session, is terrifying. That's evidence in itself. I mean, the Democrats, they're selling out the unions in respect to their support for the TPP, the same way that, question 2 on our ballot, the charter school question, you look at that and you see more money coming from outside of this state, the Waltons and Bloomberg, funding question 2, because, what I really think, and this is another part, I don't want to go too off track. I mean, we've got 21 trillion in total.
Stay on course, Chris.
10 trillion in trade deficit. Sure. We fix that with a VAT or GST, value-added tax, or good service tax, tariff, as we were talking about earlier. The average country, by the way, has 2 to 27%, either VAT or GST. We need to do this to protect our domestic economy so that the run on our currency doesn't continue.
That's right.
And that's a part of this as well. I mean, we've got $4.7 trillion that comes in tax revenue every fiscal year alone. And it's never been wasted faster and quicker, faster and in more ways than we've ever seen. And so, what I'm saying here is that we have a chance to get it right. And we know that the two parties, we know that the Democrats and Republicans, we've been sending them to Congress for so many years, and we know they're not doing anything right. And here's the thing, they've got an 18% approval rating, yet the polls suggest that over 90% of them will get reelected. And I beg to differ. And I truly believe that this district is definitely one of those districts where the incumbent is very much at risk. And I think that we're going to see a new wave of lawmakers, come through. I think that the country is tired of being lied to by both parties. And, I have all the respect in the world for anyone that wants to serve in public office, because Lord knows it is quite a challenge, even running in itself. And it's not an easy job, but you can't take big donations and you can't represent the interests of people that aren't even necessarily loyal to this country. And we're seeing all sorts of things happen here that just don't make any sense at all. And I think that, the tribunals...
Donald Trump is a perfect example. Not the, as a guy who was, on a reality show, I liked him for that value. I looked at the guy before he started running for office as a guy who knew how to reinvent himself, even when he had personal fiscal distress. Now that we have seen this individual out in the open and people are voting for him, because the reason why they're voting is they're tired of the norm down in Washington is a scary disposition. But it also could spell a boon for a guy like you who is not part of the system where, where either party will go, see that chair over there? That chair is a damn good chair and it's a Democrat and you should vote for it. And everybody goes, I'm voting for that chair because it's a Democrat.
And I say, Kevin, this isn't even about me being a good candidate. This is about doing what we can, giving back to our community. This is about making it possible for people to run for office, showing that you don't have to have 5 million on average to win a seat, that, to have common sense and respect to policy. But this is about standing up for what's right, and I have a lot of differences with the leadership right now in power, but something interestingly enough, that's going on is, the sanctuary that was just declared by President Obama in respect to the marine life. And, I understand how beautiful it is. It's a peak bigger than Mount Washington. We're looking at a canyon the size of the Grand Canyon or more. But, we're also looking at a 400-year-old fishing industry that's been put on a 30-day notice. And the lobstermen, have been put on a 7-year notice. And the governor's against it, saying that they weren't consulted. Our delegation, for the most part, is against it.
But this has been an ongoing issue where the federal government has been telling our fishermen and telling that industry what it can and cannot. We've seen catch limits imposed. It's been an ongoing issue, and for this to get to this point.
Well, what's terrifying, and I see so many examples of this, is that the president overrode the legislative process and used the Antiquities Act to go around some legislative protections that our people have put in place, and now as a result, our whole entire, and again, remember now, only 10% of the fish that we eat at the store or the restaurant is coming from the United States. That's an unbelievable fact. 85% of it is mislabeled. 90% of it coming from overseas.
Even though there are laws in place to prevent that, it's still happening.
And when you look at what happened with this marine sanctuary and how John Kerry, he made the statement talking about how it was going to save the kittens in the trees and protect the mammals, and you see that the governor's silent, the senator, and I don't say silent. We're all against it, but nobody's doing anything about it. And this is another reason why we need to step up to the plate here. This is why I'm here. This is part of the reason why.
You talk about the monies that both of these political parties are able to draw and be able to have at their disposal. How do you get, because a part of, I think, with all that money is to be able to push name recognition and to be able to advertise name recognition. How do you, with limited finances, get name recognition out there and get folks know that, hey, I'm a pretty smart guy, I have a lot of good ideas, I'm different than the norm, give me a chance. How do you do that?
Well, when you've got a district as large as ours, you've got to put yourself in high volume areas. You've got to make sure grocery stores, again, was just a part of the strategy. You've got to make sure that you're doing what you can in respect to what you've got. Sure. And that's, in our case, social media, the internet, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, all of these venues and more that are at our disposal, although interestingly enough, until I got involved in this process did I realize just how much this pay-to-play atmosphere exists, not just in our foreign policy in respect to some of the things we're seeing, but in respect to access. The fact that there are certain, public broadcast stations that won't have you on. There are certain members of the press, certain stations that don't even look at you unless you're either buying ad time or show large amounts in your coffers, which is exactly why so many of the American people don't understand the real issues that we're being faced with, because in many ways we're getting watered down and censored information. I just read in the Wall Street Journal last week that there's a chance that almost 60 to 80% of the numbers that we look at when we look at the Facebook views are wrong, that they've been messing around with the numbers.
Yeah.
And when you look at the algorithms and when you look at how much money it takes, the fact that the robots on Twitter, there's so many different ways you can look at it, but the fact of the matter is that very shortly, social media may very well be the same cost as television or as newspapers, and we're looking at 30 grand a minute on TV. We're looking at 200-300,000 in the newspapers. The fact that you can do a Facebook boost for $500 and reach 400,000 people, that's a pretty decent tool here. But we also found that Facebook has its own flavors.
Well, and it's funny you say that. It's just because you mentioned it at the beginning of that statement, and that is how do we know that you're actually getting 400,000 hits for the money you spend when they're not being forthcoming with how they're actually getting the information out there, or whose news feed is it actually hitting?
Well, here's what I know. I know that more than half of the people in this country are completely outraged by their political parties and their leadership. And I know that, one of the greatest risks we face as well is these unfunded pensions and insurance liabilities.
Sure.
The public and private sectors, public pensions, they don't have to abide by the same standards as the private pensions. And as a result, they've been propagating these over 7% annual returns, never mind using them as collateral like we saw with the MBTA, and 40% of their budget going just towards interest on Big Dig. And that's a whole other story, which, again, has
another show.
Has my opponent's fingerprints on it, and at both parties, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But we're looking at a situation where the public pensions might be, anywhere from $3 to $4 trillion short. That's the teachers, firefighters, police officers, municipal employees, and the politicians on both sides of the aisle playing hot potato. And if I was a Democrat or a Republican, you can bet, you wouldn't be hearing this out of my mouth. And that's why we need people to run unaffiliated from any party, unenrolled. And that's why what I know is whether they know who I am or not, when they get to the ballot and they're looking at the options, the Democratic and Republican appeal, it isn't there anymore. And all we need to do is look at our purses, our pocketbooks. All we need to do is look at what's happened. Look out the window and pick up the newspaper. And that's the other part of the technique too, is that we're inundated with so much information that no one has the time to even understand fully what's going on, including Congress, which is why, I'm not going to be dialing for dollars. I'm not going to be being bullied to vote certain ways. I'm going to be digesting the information to represent the people of this district.
You got 30 seconds to look in that camera and tell the fine folks in the district why they should vote for Chris Cataldo come November 8th.
Well, it's very simple. I'm not bought and paid for. You can look at my FEC report to prove it. And I really, truly believe that I am one of the people. I'm somebody that's punched a time clock. I'm somebody that understands that we need to make sure that the freedom in this country is protected. And I truly believe that I will represent better in Congress, you than anyone else at this point in time and on this ticket. And, I appreciate you taking the time to get to know me and Kevin having me on. And, I really hope you do check out CataldoForCongress.com. We have the best website, in my opinion, in politics throughout the country. And I stand by that. And I hope you'll check it out to confirm. And again, we're looking to get the most amount of votes for the least amount of money spent. And I truly believe we can achieve that, and it's going to be with people like you going to the polls, voting early, voting on time, getting that information out there, and I hope I inspire other candidacies as well. I think this is what America needs. I think the two parties are done. I really do, and I think the time is now. I think we need to save our country. I truly believe it. Hey.
Thank you very much for coming here and talking about your campaign. We wish you the best of luck on November 8th. And
thank you.
We want you to get out there. Remember, it's important for you, the voter, to make the decision. Not necessarily about the party. You should make it about the person. Listen to what they have to offer. It's proven that the two-party system is having its problems. Get out there November 8th. Make a difference. You've been watching CrossTalk here on WHCA. Have a great day.